right, Pasadenans and heroes everywhere. You may have been wondering, what are the Jewish holidays that are actually mentioned in the Torah? Some of them are, some of them aren't. Well, you've come to the right parsha. In this week's Torah portion, Parashat Pinchas, we will review all of the Jewish holidays and how we used to celebrate them. This is maybe the most often read Torah portion in a regular Torah service, and you'll find out why in just a moment. And I'd love to hear your questions about Jewish holidays, or if you like, you can ask me anything, and people have. So feel free, heroes. We are going to go on with your questions and talking about the Jewish holidays right after this brief musical interlude. Stick around. All right, everybody, coming back at you. Let's see what my face looks like. Oh, you can't see because I've got a mask on. I just wanted to wear this and see how it sounded on the intro. So, very delighted to see all of you. I took my mask down. I hope that didn't freak you out too badly. I promise you will not get a computer virus from watching this. Shouldn't joke about viruses. This is a serious time. I am Rabbi John Carrier. I'm delighted to learn with you here just about every week on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live, and on the old Twitch arena, where you can find us at twitch.tv/Pasadena Jewish. That's us. You can also find us on the PJTC public Facebook page and the PJTC public YouTube channel arena. So this is RabbiChat, brought to you by Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. I'm your friendly neighborhood rabbi, Rabbi John Carrier, and you can ask me anything. That's kind of how this show works. So let's jump over into the multi-chat, see who's joining us from all these places. I see a couple folks. Carla J says hello. Britton S says hello. These couple of folks who know each other from a class that I taught a couple of years ago in Burbank. Delighted to see both of you here. Anybody else who's joining us, love for you to say hello. Let us know where you're coming from. You know, we get people coming in from all over Los Angeles, all over California, all over the world. The world. I don't know if you get that old Mike Myers reference. So, but people say hi from wherever they're from, and I'd be delighted to say hi back at you. So, just to jump into it, this week's Torah portion, Parashat Pinchas, is, I'm going to put money on this, possibly the most read Torah portion in synagogue services when we read Torah in synagogue services. I know Torah services changed up a little bit in some places lately, but when I'm talking about, you know, if it's a holiday or if it's Shabbat and people have the Torah scroll out and people are, you know, all gathered close around the table, around the Torah scroll, and you call up somebody for an aliyah, and that means they have the honor of saying the blessing over the Torah reading. You do that a few times, you know, on holidays you do it 5 times, on Yom Kippur you do it 6, on Shabbat you do it 7, and there's usually a maftir or an additional Torah reading that's kind of a repetition. It's often a repetition of the 7th or whatever the ultimate Torah reading is. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is different, right? Sometimes the maftir is picked based not on what the Torah reading was before, but the maftir is based on the calendar. It's based on what's going on in the world. Most often, the maftir, or the additional reading, got a couple people here. Hello, 1, 2, 3 for the blah, blah, blah. Hig is nice here. Wolfie Gamer, 10899 is here. Says, trust. Hey there, nice to see you. So sometimes the maftir is picked for some other reason. If Shabbat bumps into another holiday, like Rosh Chodesh, like the celebration of the fact that a new month is here. If Shabbat runs into Shavuot, like it did recently. This past Shavuot, another biblical holiday that we'll talk about today, also happened to coincide with Shabbat. And so on Shabbat, that was Shavuot, we had a maftir that wasn't the regular Torah reading. And in fact, any holiday where we take the Torah out and read from it, the maftir is not from that week. It's not from the Torah reading for that holiday. It is from Parashat Pinchas. It's from Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, I believe around chapter 28-ish, because in Parashat Pinchas, in addition to what happens to Pinchas, who's a guy who stabbed some folks in last week's Parsha, look it up, And in this Parsha, in Parashat Pinchas, it says what happened to him after that. Again, no spoilers. And then it lists, here are all the major holidays you should celebrate. And it gets into recipes. It says, here's the number of bulls and goats and rams and stuff you should sacrifice in observance of this holiday. And if it's a multi-day holiday, it's on very different holidays, on some holidays like Sukkot or Pesach, for the different days of that holiday, you sacrifice a different number of things, right? And anytime you're sacrificing an animal, it says you should also mix in some barley meal or flour of some sort. It's usually barley meal, I think, with some oil and some wine as a libation offering. And that's what Parashat Pinchas does. For each holiday, it lists the things that you should sacrifice in the Mishkan, that is the portable tabernacle, or in the temple in honor of that holiday. So this was people's primary ritual connected with connecting to God, right? People didn't know how to talk to God. People they probably prayed. Anybody, there's, what do they say? There's no atheists in foxholes. People have been calling out to God since there have been people and God that knew about each other. But over the years, how we call out to God, what we do that gets us into the mood for having a moment with God has been different. For, I'm going to guess, thousands of years, humanity's primary mode of connecting to God, or whatever their higher power was, had to do with taking some of their good stuff and dedicating it to God's service. And if you are a farmer or into the animal husbandry business, your good stuff, your wealth, was connected to livestock, cows, sheeps, goats, rams, which is another kind of sheeps, I think. So the sacrifice wasn't like killing animals per se. It was taking some of your wealth and setting it aside for a holy purpose, right? Acknowledging that God was the source of your bounty, and so some of that bounty should be ceded back to God, as was flour and oil and wine. These were the primary agricultural commodities or groceries back in the day. Good to see Vit Yermalowitz is here. Good to see you all. Shalom from Malta. Very cool. Watch out for the Falcons. Good to see you, Vit. Natalie Sorota's here. Shalom, you all thought the Rabbi was only on Thursday this week. So, housekeeping. Come back to this later. I'm here Tuesday today. Next week, I'm going to be on Thursdays only for a little while. We've been doing Tuesdays and Thursdays, having some great conversations. The fact is, got some big stuff cooking at PJTC that I need to devote a little bit more time to. Especially people who have learned from me in the Jew Curious School, you might have an inkling as to what that is. I'm not going to say more about that right now. Stay tuned, but I need to spend a little bit more time on that. So for the time being, we will just be learning a little Torah on Thursdays, but we will still make plenty of time for you to ask me anything. Wolfie Gamer 10899, this is great. Good to have you here. So where were we? We were talking about groceries. We were talking about all the things that we sacrificed. Back in the day, people connected to God through making sacrifices. This is true in the Jewish culture. This is true in the Egyptian culture, where we were immersed for a very long time. This was true certainly in the Greek culture, as you can read if you know, every once in a while I have this yen. Is that the right word? I think that's Yiddish. This longing to read the Iliad. I just happen to love that story of the Iliad, and it's replete with sacrifices that look very much like the sacrifices that we read about in the Torah. It's thought that the Iliad, or at least its redaction, was contemporary or close contemporary with the time of David, right? So cultures connected to God by killing animals, and they usually didn't like burn the whole animal or feed the whole animal to God. They usually would set aside a part of that to destroy in God's name, not for God's sake, as Maimonides would say, but for ours, because it focused our attention. God doesn't need to eat. But then the rest of it, the bulk of it, of the animals that were destroyed, were shared among the people present as a kind of festive meal. And you can see this in the Iliad. You can see this in the accounts in the Torah of people sacrificing and then sharing the food. The Kohanim, they shared this food among themselves, and even on holidays when people are called to bring sacrifices, they would partake in these feasts as well. The word Chag in Hebrew means alternatively holiday, but it also means feast. And so most of our holidays were actually feast days. For example, Chag HaPesach, Chag HaShavuot, and Chag HaSukkot, all of which are talked about in this week's Parsha. So I bring that to your attention just so that you know, every time there's a holiday, every time the maftir is a little bit different, it's usually Pinchas. And so that's why this has my wager, I haven't actually counted, but I'm pretty sure that this is the Parsha that is read from most often, more than any other Parsha in a regular Torah service or a holiday Torah service. And that's what it's about. And so what I would prompt you to think about is, hey, I'm reading the Torah, there's all this animal sacrifice going on. Do Jews still do that? You would be surprised how often I get this question. And I remember one time when my rabbi said, you would be surprised how often I get this question. And he said one time, this is my Rabbi Alexander Davis, sorry to call you out, but you did teach me a lot, so that's what happens. Rabbi Alexander Davis was talking about getting a phone call from a reporter in Minneapolis saying, hey, is it true that Jewish people still sacrifice animals as a part of their religious ritual? And he said, you would be surprised how often I get that question. He says, yes, you should come by. The smells are fantastic. You know, it's just like barbecue wall to wall. And I thought, no, he really doesn't get it. He's just saying that. And then I became a rabbi, and then I began, you know, one of my favorite things to do as a rabbi is have people come to the synagogue who aren't Jewish. Like, I love, don't get me wrong, love Jewish people in the synagogue. Miss Jewish people in the synagogue. We'll get there again. But I also love it when people who aren't Jewish come and visit the synagogue. I've had school groups come visit, you know, every synagogue I've been a part of, Burbank Temple, this would happen every year. A certain wonderful 8th grade history teacher would bring students to visit the synagogue in their kind of unit on world religions and the Reformation and stuff like that. And they would come in and they would see, this is how we do our church, right? This is what our place looks like. This is what our services are like. These are some of the core tenets of our beliefs. And they would ask me questions. And that's, I'll say, how I got brave about doing Ask Me Anythings, because 8th graders throw some hardballs at you, I will say. One time I made the mistake of asking an open-ended question like, hey, what do you guys know about Judaism? And one 8th grader raised his hand and says, that you killed Jesus. And I said, no, that was the Romans, but thank you for bringing that up. And then we had a good discussion about that particular scene in history. And so from then, I've since 8th graders, I've never been scared and asked me anything sessions. So I love it when groups come. There was even in Pasadena, there was a group that came, and it was like small school children who went to a religious-based elementary school, and this mother kind of had to goad her son and say, ask that question that you asked in the van on the way over. And he says, where do you sacrifice the animals? I'm going to guess he was like 8 years old, maybe 9. And he says, where in this building do you sacrifice the animals? And I said, thank you for asking, because if your only exposure to Judaism is what you have read in your Bible, especially in the section called the Old Testament, we just call it the Testament, but the Old Testament, then you may think that this is what ancient Jews did. You may think that that's what we still do. And the true fact is we don't. There are groups associated or connected with the ancient Jews that are still around today. Specifically, the Samaritans are still around, and you can go to their places in Israel, and they still do have sacrificial rituals of sacrificing animals around holidays that we share in common. But rabbinic Jews, that is, most Jews that you will meet in the U.S., once we lost the Second Temple, stopped doing that. Because one of the instructions in the Torah is that you only do this in the place that God has chosen for it to be done. Originally, back in the, if we're going back in the Parsha and the book of Numbers, it was where the Mishkan was. No other places, just the Mishkan. Once Solomon built the first temple, it was done there and no place else, ideally. Even within the Tanakh, even within the Hebrew Bible, there are records of people breaking that rule and going and sacrificing all sorts of places. And then when we lost that temple, we thought we lost our connection to God. And then the rabbis in the Babylonian exile began, let's say, the first reboot. If it's not working, or if you can't make it work because you don't have the temple, pull the plug it back in, try it again. Every IT professional I've ever talked to would give you the same advice. And they rebooted Judaism through prayer and through study and through deeds of kindness and through deeds of charity. And then Cyrus came and schmeiced Babylonia, and we got to go back, and through Ezra and Nehemiah we built another temple, and then the Romans came and messed all that up, and then we rebooted it again. And that second reboot by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and his students and associates in Yavna, replacing sacrifice with prayer and study and deeds of kindness, would serve us for another 2,000 years. And, well, not quite 2,000 yet, but I think it'll be 2,000 and counting, right? This was about 1,950 years ago, by the end of July. That's Tisha B'Av, which is the traditional date set for the destruction of the Second Temple. For all that time, we have served God, connected to God, built community through prayer, through study, through deeds of kindness, through hard work and healing the world. And so we don't do the sacrifices anymore, in case anybody has any questions about that. However, we remember them. We do remember our history. We do relive and rehearse our history. That's what Pesach is a reenactment of this night of going out of Egypt, so that we can feel personally connected to our ancestors, so that we have this through line of connection with our people that extends back thousands of years, right? We keep talking about stuff that we used to do, even though we don't do it anymore, and some say we may never do it again, and that's quite all right, especially if you're a cow. So, when you read Parashat Pinchas this week, I want just I'm going to say when. Just give you the benefit of the doubt. When you read Parashat Pinchas this week, you may get stuck. You may be like, oh good, they're going to kill more animals. That does not make me feel Jewish. That does not make me feel connected to the Holy One. That does not make me feel connected to my community, all this slaughter and some cooking. But set that aside for a second. Set aside the what and focus on the why. Right? Set aside the what, focus on the why. Why did they do this? They did this because they found that, or was decreed for them that, and then they corroborated it through experience, that if they take the abundance in their life and they say, I know that I am not 100% responsible for how well I fare in the world. Right? I know that in America we have this strong sense of individualism and personal responsibility, but everybody knows, like, especially if you're, I don't think anybody's so obtuse as to think I did all of this myself. Nobody helped me. No humans helped me. I had no luck in this. I had no divine nudge in this. It's a recognition of humility that everything I have was not completely created by me. And if I can recognize that fact with humility, that opens me up to two things: spiritual connection and community connection. Because all of these holidays that they talk about, and just to be clear, Pinchas talks about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, two big holidays that are coming up, Sukkot, that happens 5 days after Yom Kippur, that's with the little tent out in your yard, and then Pesach, that's Passover, and Shavuot. And it also talks about the Rosh Hodeshim, the Rosh Hodeshes, the new month, right? It establishes the Jewish calendar. It establishes our connection to the land and also our connection to the cycles of the universe, right? Not for nothing, Rosh Chodesh was a big time because it was the darkest part of the month, and maybe people need to get together when it's dark out. But then that also points to the fact that it's the middle of the month, the full moon. That's when most of our holidays are. Ruthie Honey's in the house says, hey! So every one of these holidays that was decreed for a holy purpose, recognizing Rosh Hashanah, right? This day on which you can start anew. Yom Kippur, this day on which if you have any baggage left over from the previous year, you can clear that to start anew. Sukkot, really recognizing your abundance as in a harvest festival, but also B, the tenuousness of life, that our ancestors wandered through the wilderness. That's what the book of Numbers is all about, and we relive that when we live in tents outside for a little bit, or at least, have a snack out there. Pesach, recognizing our redemption, right? Our freedom from slavery at God's hands. And Shavuot, recognizing this great gift of the Torah for us. Yes, these are all wonderful connections to the source of our blessings, our Holy One. But every single one also says, get together with your buds, get together with your friends, right? 3 of these 5 are pilgrimage festivals, meaning you need to get together, all of the people that can get together to feast together. And it says, look, if you can't carry all your crops that you want to donate, sell them where you are, bring that money and buy food in Jerusalem. The point is the party, not the physical objects that you're trading in. So if you're grossed out by all the sacrifices in Parashat Pinchas, remember what they were for. That is connection to God, connection to our history, and connection to each other. And think about how you might reframe that today. What's the thing that you can do on these days, given that you have a completely different economic connection? God willing, you have an economic connection these days. Given that you have a completely different source of abundance in your life, how do you get humble about that abundance? How do you share some of that goodness back with its source? How do you make your resources a hub for celebrating with your community, even or especially when you can't physically get with your community? How would we reframe all of these holidays that are mentioned in Parashat Pinchas in COVID times? That's my big question for you this week. I really appreciate learning this with you. Michael Pacheco says, are you going to do the fall holiday series again? Let's see. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Michael Pacheco has been here with me for a little while. Every year I kind of do a series of videos about the high holidays. I've done those, I've done those the last couple of years. So I'm going to be doing something similar but different because now I'm with this wonderful community here in Pasadena. So I know one thing that we're working on is a series involving Elul. And Elul is the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah. And so if you're curious about any of the Jewish fall holidays, go to the Rabbi John Carrier YouTube channel. Not shilling it out here. It's out there. Just look up like Rabbi John Carrier fall holidays. I've got a whole series of videos on all the different holidays for the fall, including Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. You can learn with me that way. But this year, all that's out there. This year, I want to focus on something different, and that is Elul. That is the month of spiritual preparation leading up to the high holidays. This is a month of what we call Heshbon HaNefesh, meaning kind of an accounting for the soul, right? Really taking a hard look in the past year and saying, okay, what could I have done better? What could other people have done better for me? Let's focus on the former more than the latter, because that's the stuff you have control over, right? What are some things that I could have done better? What are some things that I could have done better for myself? What are some things that I could have done that would have made me feel more connected to God versus less connected to God? And that is a kind of introspective exercise that is the perfect preparation for Rosh Hashanah, and all the more so for Yom Kippur. So look out for that. That is something that I'm committed to doing. We've been talking a lot about that at the temple. And so it won't be on my it won't be on my personal YouTube channel, but it'll be more coming from PJTC. So If you're not subscribed to the PJTC YouTube channel, get on the stick, y'all. I think that's a hockey term. Please subscribe to the PJTC YouTube channel. Also, I highly recommend you follow the PJTC Facebook page, and here's why. Somebody pointed this out to me this week. If you didn't know this, we live stream all of our services now. So Friday night services, Saturday morning services, we live stream those on Facebook and on YouTube and on this service called Stream Spot. There's like a dedicated link to that, but they're also available to the public on Facebook and YouTube. And if you've been watching these for a while, you may have noticed that this past weekend was different. We did a different kind of order of service. On Saturday morning, we did the service in about an hour and a half instead of 2.5 hours. The month of July, we are experimenting with our services. Some people have loved it. Some people have not, right? And one of my rabbis many years ago said, like, I was leading the service. He's like, nice new melody. You know, you just ruined Shabbat for somebody, right? This happens. Like if you have a connection to particular melodies of Shabbat and you don't hear those, it's like a deficient Shabbos for you. And I recognize that fully. But I also recognize that for some people, how we do services is wanting. And I want to honor both of those things. So if you're really into the way we do services, please be patient with us over the month of July because we're trying out a few new things. You might find something that you absolutely adore that you hadn't ever thought of before. And I'm also committed to making some of the things very much the same so that you can experience the things that you've come to love. So stay tuned for that. Check that stuff out, especially our Friday and Saturday services. We are getting a little weird with it in July. These are not permanent changes. These are things that we're trying out. We'll probably be back to the regularly scheduled programming in August with maybe some adjustments based on how people appreciate or don't appreciate what we're doing in the experiments. So I really, somebody says, Ghost of Shadow Rat, a powerful djinn enters your chat. Make a wish. Ha ha ha. Vit Yermalowitz, Natalie, was that kind of spoiler alert? Love the options that come with Zoom Shoal. Yeah, so that's another thing that we're cooking right now a little bit. We are trying to figure out how to incorporate Zoom to make our services a little bit more interactive. That's not going to happen this week. God willing, we're working on making it happen the following week. So stay tuned for that. It was a little bit of a spoiler alert, but that's okay. I've been talking about this whole time. You know, it's like, spoiler alert, Darth Vader is Luke's father. And if anybody's really upset about hearing that for the first time, you know, that's your own cultural literacy at stake. So it's been really great learning with all of you. I really appreciate the comments and the questions. And no, it's quite all right. Natalie says, "Oh, sorry." No, it's quite all right. This is some fun stuff that we're doing, and also not just for fun, not because we're bored. Like I love the services, but because people have asked us. Let's change things up a bit. Let's just keep it fresh, and so we're giving it a shot, and we're learning as we go. I'll say last Friday there were some skin knees involved. It's like kind of bumped into each other a little bit. We know that, we appreciated that, but I will say that Saturday morning, there's just my own personal feeling. Saturday morning was, and I'm trying not to cry right now. It was like one of the most moving Shabbat morning services I've ever been a part of. Like 10 minutes in, I'm like, I need a tissue. My allergy medication just kicked off. So if you want to try some, if you've never been to a Shabbat service before, we're live on Facebook and YouTube on Friday at 7:30 p.m., on Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Love to have you there. Always love learning the Torah portion with you. We've been talking about Parashat Pinchas. Be talking about it more on Friday and Saturday. So next week, so I will be here this Thursday on the regular 3 o'clock time. Next week, we're going to shift it to once a week. Maybe we'll go a little bit longer if we have some more questions. So love learning with you. Love hanging out with you. Really appreciate everybody who said hi in the chat, especially the powerful djinn. That happens too sometimes. So thanks for learning with me, everybody. Until next time, Pasadenans and heroes everywhere. Peace.